Hi, and welcome to Ludonarrative Dissidents. This is Call of Cthulhu 7th edition, a classic of tabletop role-playing games. This is the newest edition, published in 2015, and this is something I imagine all three of us, me, Greg, and James, have all played at least once in our lives. So it will be interesting to talk about what this game is, what it does, and how it does it. It is the most popular horror role-playing game, certainly the most popular Cthulhu role-playing game. Hopefully, you all at least have a little background in knowing what Cthulhu is and what we mean by that.
I mean, I would be hard-pressed to think of one more popular, more internationally renowned, more fundamental to horror gaming. I mean, it got there first and has never left.
Yes, it's not just the template for all horror games. It's pretty much the template for all games that aren't fantasy RPGs, and possibly science fiction RPGs. It's a monument in the field. It's absolutely massive. And the other thing that's worth saying is the reason that everyone knows about Cthulhu is largely Call of Cthulhu, because before it came out, H.P. Lovecraft's work was not particularly noted. It was, just there with other pulp writers, occasionally anthologized, but was not significant. And Call of Cthulhu, in the same way that the West End Star Wars role-playing game is one of the things that kept the torch alive for the Star Wars universe, and in fact created much of the expanded universe, footnote to a footnote here, in the same way that the Willow TV series has taken most of its lore from the Willow RPG source book, now back up in an Inception kind of way out of those footnotes. Call of Cthulhu is so huge. I mean, certainly the first 20th game set in the 20th century that had any impact at all, and remains that way. It's hard to underestimate its significance on the field.
Yeah. And so, yes, let me preface everything I'm about to say with my love and respect for this game that has given me so much, and yet at the same time it does use the future conditional, which every time that popped up it was like a miniature sand check going off like fireworks in my brain. But I'll say no more about it. Except that I believed in Chaosium and they should have done better.
Yeah, so one day, Greg, one day.
Yeah, it screws my column balance as well, but I can't be bothered to go there.
Yeah.
Someday my prince will come.
Yes, Call of Cthulhu was first published in 1981. The newest edition was published.
Old? All right, listeners, take a moment. Think back to, think back through the hairspray beyond the 1980s that you are presented in popular media, which is all leg warmers and primary colors and Kajagoogoo songs, and think back to the real 80s, which was, fear that Ronald Reagan was seriously gonna launch a nuclear strike because he woke up one day convinced Jesus wanted him to. Or for James, think back to,
No, we were fucking terrified of Ronald Reagan as well.
And rightly so. But you guys had Thatcher, which, wow, I mean...
Yeah, we had Thatcher into the 90s, don't forget.
Just but wow. Yeah. So, I mean, the 80s... so think about where you were in the 80s. I'm sure many of our listeners, it's like, I didn't have to go through the 80s. I only know them through Stranger Things. And it's like, you're actually kind of lucky. The 80s were littered with the trash of the 70s, and a lot of 70s stuff didn't look good when it was new and only degraded. God, those fucking collars, those long dagger collars. People were still wearing those in 1981 when Call of Cthulhu came out. So much plaid and avocado and orange shag carpeting.
Yes, we don't know if Sandy Peterson, the original creator, was ever wearing those shirts. though the only shirt of his I remember is one from rather later, from the 90s, from a British convention, where he had a black T-shirt with the Doom logo in enormous full colour letters on the front, and on the back in very small type it just said "Wrote it," because he did.
Yeah.
He did. He was on the original Doom team, changed the face of gaming twice. The man's
and he was illustrated in the games. The Games Workshop edition did an edition of Call of Cthulhu that had the color plates in it, and I just remember an absolutely po-faced, ghastly image of Sandy Peterson as like the Mygo from what's the
fun guy from Yuggoth?
Yeah, well, what's the story where, the one is masquerading as a human?
The Whisperer in the Darkness.
Yep. It's like Sandy Peterson is the Whisperer in Darkness, peeling his gloves off to reveal the grossness underneath. It was a fantastic illustration.
Genuinely creepy.
Genuinely creepy.
Call of Cthulhu is one of these few games that has lasted all this time, from 1981 to the newest edition, 7th edition, which is the one we're focusing on today, which was published in 2015 and has been the standard. And it also marks a departure in a lot of game mechanics from earlier editions. A lot of Call of Cthulhu changes from the 1st through 6th edition were rather incremental. For me, it's really interesting. You're right, James, in talking about how this has like created a new mode of tabletop role-playing games, because, before this, there was the paradigm of D&D, fantasy adventurers going out on quests, and obviously inspired and modeled after fantastic literature of all kinds of sources. I mean, that's an endless debate, but like fantasy as a genre. And Call of Cthulhu came along and it was modeled after horror literature. And in horror literature, you don't go out and fight the monsters. You investigate mysteries caused by monsters or cultists or something supernatural or occult. And so this created an entirely different paradigm. You investigate things and solve mysteries rather than fight monsters and clear out dungeons. Now both games have featured scenarios that do both things. They're investigative D&D scenarios. There's dungeon crawling in Call of Cthulhu, but it's also set, as you said, in the 20th century, particularly the 1920s and 30s. In all editions of Call of Cthulhu, the default assumption is you are someone living in the 1920s who is, by hook or by crook, deciding to investigate a mystery that will involve a supernatural element or elements.
Yes. And it never quite goes into why, because in the same way that D&D never quite goes into why are you going out down dungeons and killing monsters, because it's fun. It's very kind of, it's open in a way that a lot of horror games aren't. Sorry, Greg, you go ahead.
What I was going to say is, how much, decide is a strong word, because this is something I've dealt with writing horror games, is that, you have to accept that your character is destined to undergo this horrible thing that you would probably rather, if it was going to happen to you, you would absolutely want to avoid it. But it's going to happen to your character, and you have to buy into that, because otherwise there's no game. And it's something you have to do when you're playing horror games, is you have to accept that, okay, my character is going to have not just one bad thing happen to them, but a series, and some of which are going to be unavoidable. And you have to embrace that suck if you are going to get anything out of horror gaming. And it's okay to not like horror gaming. But if you don't like horror gaming, maybe try to not take your dislike of horror gaming out on horror gaming.
Yeah. Call of Cthulhu, as it stands, does have this sort of generalist toolkit approach of saying, here's how you can make a person who lives in the 1920s, and here's a tool, here's all these monsters and mechanics to create a mystery for this person. Now, how that person slots into that mystery is up to you. Whereas games like Delta Green have a like that was Delta Green's contribution in the 90s, was like, here's a framing mechanism to explain why your FBI agent is looking into the UFO sightings. And
right. I mean, Delta Green started as, we need a funnel to put fresh PCs into these situations, because I think what happened was that there was a lot of them finding that, oh, well, this party that's a bootlegger and a French can-can dancer and a New England professor and a Trobriand Island fisherman, it just doesn't seem to have thematic coherence, and it's not contributing to a general feeling of nihilistic horror, which is what the pagan dudes wanted out of Call of Cthulhu. So they're like, let's come up with a setting where everyone is from the same tone. Everyone's from the same tonal planet. Yeah. And of course, they came up with burnt out cops and soldiers.
Yeah. There's a brilliant little bit in the 7th edition which kind of explains how you can do this, how you can take all these people from disparate backgrounds, and everyone generates their character and they're wildly different, and the GM just says, okay, you're all passengers on a plane and you don't know each other. Brilliant. But you can't do that for every scenario. And
you can't do that to replace people who died playing the characters who died playing Masks of Nyarlathotep.
No, that does not work. And I was expecting 7th edition to do something to address this. It's we are 40 years on from 1982. Times have changed. People do look for something different, and it barely it does address it, but it doesn't address it within the structure of the rules, within character generation. It just kind of says, find ways for your player characters to come together. But that, briefly, you mentioned deaths in Nyarlathotep, and one of the other things Call of Cthulhu brought to the table was an expectation that you're probably going to fail and you may well die. People say Paranoia. 1984 was the first game. Paranoia is kind of set in Orwell's 1984, but it came out in 1984. Was the first game to make death in games not only acceptable but part of the process. But no, Cthulhu was there 3 years previously. There is a general expectation that if you don't die, you're going to end up, at the very least, considerably less compos mentis than you were before.
Yeah.
And that was a huge jump forward. The whole idea that characters were not open-ended.
I will expand on that in that Cthulhu, the expectation of Call of Cthulhu is you start off with this shiny, new in wrapper character who is going to go through situations, and it's sort of, I see it in my mind as a sort of Bermuda Triangle of doom, because what you could just die. You could walk into that deep one's claws and get decapitated. And that's, one possibility. You will be physically unable to proceed. There's also a sanity mechanic tracking how well you emotionally and intellectually deal with the awfulness that you are experiencing, much of which is paranormal in nature and just inimical to human processing. Mm-hmm. So the other fate in store is you go mad, you lose it. Mm-hmm. You can't. And the third possibility, which I don't think actually comes up that much, is that, oh no, the plot takes you out. You shot a dude in the face because he was a cultist, and the judge does not take, but your honor, he was a cultist, into account when adjusting sentencing guidelines. You just get locked up forever because your Trobriand Islander character didn't have any points put in getting away with murder body disposal skills. So there are your character, the hope. Call of Cthulhu holds out this flickering, illusory hope that my character can become stronger and stronger, which is the inevitable expectation of most game characters. I'm going to spend my XP, I'm going to get better, and I will continue to widen my margins of victory. Whereas in Call of Cthulhu, it's like, sure, you could learn a spell that'll let you do all this cool stuff. It might kill you. It might drive you insane. It might put you in jail. But maybe it won't do any of that. Maybe you'll just be the cool sorcerer who gets away with it. And so you push your luck until eventually one head of the Cerberus gets you. And then you're like, oh, I was so close to having a functional character. Well, maybe this Parisian dancer will do it.
That's certainly true. I think one of the things that Call of Cthulhu does Chaosium, the publisher, does as a business is instead of putting in here's how to do your campaign setting, here's how to focus your games in the main book, they have published a game line. With, of course, a lot of campaigns. Of course, they've revamped. There's a new edition of Mask of Nyarlathotep. There's, Call of Cthulhu Berlin, Beyond the Mountains of Madness, a new campaign called The Children of Fear. And basically, they say, here's how to run a game, but here's what the game should be about. And the scenarios and campaigns of Call of Cthulhu have certainly been one of the strong points of the game since the beginning, I think, is because generating complex mysteries of, Mask of Nyarlathotep is perhaps the best single tabletop role-playing game campaign ever published. Certainly one of the most influential, because of its just how many people saw it and played it.
Best is a word so broad that it's almost meaningless, but it's influential, I'll give you. I've never played in it, so I don't know how good it is.
I run it twice.
Okay.
And
twice.
Yeah.
You glutton for punishment.
The second time I ran it, I actually used the Trail of Cthulhu rules with a lot of pulp rules. And speaking of pulp, they do have a supplement called Pulp Cthulhu to add to make your game a pulp game, which characters are more durable, they lose less sand, and they can fight back a lot better. So you can more two-fisted action, mowing down hordes of cultists with Tommy guns. And so on and so forth.
This is an issue that I will dig into when we get into how people play it.
Yeah. So, Call of Cthulhu is a fascinating game. One thing that always struck me was that reading about its early history is a lot of people who are really into Call of Cthulhu weren't even really fans of Lovecraft or horror per se. They were really interested in history and the 1920s in particular. They wanted to be someone in the 1920s. And I think there is still this divide because Call of Cthulhu is primarily a historical game, like a game set in historical periods. Not just the 1920s now. Like I said, there's Berlin, which is set in, it's set in the 30s, I think, like the roaring, the Weimar Republic age.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Oh no, it says 1920s. So yeah, but yeah.
Okay. All right. Whew. That's much better.
Yeah. So yeah, the Weimar Republic period, not 10 years later.
I believe it's pronounced Weimar.
Weimar. Yeah. Sorry. But there's a lot of people have written like historical settings for it, and they like setting in different periods of history, and that's sort of the appeal. But there is it's really set in the 1920s it's a very specific period of history that it's really interested in, the Lovecraftian mythos era, because that's when Lovecraft wrote, and so. We're beginning to see other things too, like Regency Cthulhu. As a supplement, but yeah,
or Cthulhu Invictus. That one was supposed to be pretty.
Oh
good,
yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I ran a couple of games set in that. Yeah, that was fun to set in the Roman era. But I think so. That's sort of the broad perspective. You play someone in a horror story instead of a fantasy story, and you are investigating what goes bump in the night. And let
me throw a thing out here that clearly inspired by Lovecraft and adores Lovecraft. But wouldn't you say that Call of Cthulhu, the game, quote-unquote, emulates Lovecraft in the same way that D&D emulates Tolkien? Which is, you can see where this tree grew from that seed. But I think that Call of Cthulhu, the game, is its own genre, separate from Lovecraft. I mean, intertwined.
Mm-hmm. It's a lot closer to the source material than D&D is to really any fantasy that had come previously. Nobody is going out hunting Darkspawn of Shub-Niggurath for XP and gold.
Yeah.
Cheerfully granted. But at the same time, nothing in Lovecraft except maybe there's like maybe 2 characters in the whole Lovecraft oeuvre I can think of who had more than one adventure.
Yes.
There are stories of, like, I know when I first got my hands on a copy of Call of Cthulhu and read through it, I was very interested not only like reading the monsters, and then like every monster had a little description, like a paragraph from the story in which the monster comes from. So I spent a lot of time actually tracking down those specific stories so I could understand what the monster actually did. But I also
that's how they get you, Ross.
That's how they got me. And then I also remember reading up all about all these cool mythos spells. Oh, I can cast Fleshward and Shriveling, and like if I get my hands on an Necronomicon, my character will be powerful and cool, and like totally like, you know, I just wanted the idea of playing as someone with a high mythos skill and a lot of spell points so I could blast people with magic, and I knew that would be really hard and my character would probably die very soon, but like it was just so cool. I wanted to be that person who could do that.
Which, okay, this raises the question, could Call of Cthulhu the game have succeeded without Dungeons and Dragons before it? Because what you describe is like a D&D magic user on mythos steroids.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, what if Cloud Kill was somehow much worse? And, you know, if you hadn't played D&D, would that be an appealing idea to you?
When I first got it, it was a long time before I actually got to play it, because finding people to play it was a challenge. So, especially when D&D was around. D&D was something people got and were more interested in. But I think...
What if instead of being a cool elf with a longbow, you were a wheezing, neurasthenic New England academic who faints from terror when he sees a rapey fishman?
It must be said that the character that they that generate within the rulebook of 7th edition and uses in examples of play thereafter, Harvey Walters, a 42-year-old journalist who I think is described as handsome, well-dressed, and a little overweight. Not a description you'll get of many D&D characters, I think.
Well, and okay, to take the devil's advocate role in a non-terrible way for once, the argument you can make is that, all right, compared to the scale of a mythos entity, Harvey Walters, the Trobriand Islander, and the Parisian Dancer are just as well equipped to deal with that as Miyamoto Musashi or a Navy SEAL on steroids or Albert Einstein's genius brain. You know, the difference between the world's strongest man and some fat schlub like Harvey Walters is, in mythos terms, a rounding error. So, you know, your odds of surviving are largely the same whether you're hyper-competent or just some ding-dong who fell into the mythos.
Yeah. Which, can I just... It's like, I don't know if this is digression or a fork, which makes me wonder why the game has 30 pages of combat system in it. Because, I mean, my defining memory of Call of Cthulhu was in the first game I ever played. I had a Tommy gun, and I was really excited, and something smashed through a window, and it was big, and it had wings and no face, and I emptied the Tommy gun at it, and it roared and took my head off. And it was like, oh, okay, we're not in a dungeon anymore. This is, you don't need 30 pages of that. The original edition of Call of Cthulhu was powered by, as this edition largely is, was powered by the basic roleplay system, which we talked about last time regarding the laundry files. It's very much the same percentile-based system that was developed originally for RuneQuest.
Right.
It puts a fair
it's a robust, strong, simulationist trad game.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's served its time. It's done 40 years, and people criticize 7th edition for moving away from 6th edition and stuff like that. But you compare it to the difference between editions of D&D, and it's like, it's like tiny, tiny little additions and tweaks and you know, points, scales are enlarged or something like that. My point was, basic roleplay in the original Call of Cthulhu 1st edition box set, the entire thing was 16 pages, and that was character generation and combat and everything else. And now this rulebook, which is a chunk, it's what, 450 pages? A substantial tome, 30 pages of combat, when, for me, the essence of Call of Cthulhu is do not get into combat. If you're in combat, you are in the wrong place and you are playing it wrong.
The only game where the most experienced character has the highest movement rate and the lowest encumbrance, to steal a gag from, I think, Murphy's Rules. Are we on to how does it do that? Because you are suggesting that it could be a lot simpler. But, I mean, people are used to it, and boy, if you think the rules are maybe a little clunky and encrusted with needless knobs, bells, and whistles, consider that, you know, someone who has been running any game for 25 or 30 years can probably make that kitten purr no matter how many barnacles are clinging to the hull. Probably the really experienced Call of Cthulhu players use a fraction of those rules, but they still like having them there as it's almost like, you know, I like having them there so I can say no to them, so that I can just use the stuff I like. But probably the rules that people like vary from GM to GM. This is something I've suggested with, you know, Rain has hit drive-through RPG just today. Huzzah.
Whoa.
Sorry for the long delay, everyone. But it's got a ton of rules, and you would be absolutely irrational to try and use all of them. But you can pick and choose off that menu and get a very specifically tailored system to your tastes. And I think there's a little of that going on with everything they offer you in this edition of Call of Cthulhu. And a lot of the rules are explicitly labeled as, okay, you know, this is an alternate rule. This is something to do if you don't want to be doing character generation every 5... If you're a baby who doesn't want to be doing character generation again every 5 sessions.
Yeah. No, for sure. I think Call of Cthulhu, in particularly this edition, it's a legacy game, right? Like a D&D. And so there are certain tropes that have become intrinsic to Call of Cthulhu itself to be, you know, in order to be Call of Cthulhu, the RPG, it has to have these mechanics.
The sand roll. You're referring to the sand roll.
Well, a lot of things. For example, like 7th edition is actually interesting to talk about because it's a departure from all previous editions in a lot of ways. So, and we're, you know, talking about legacy, like the original Call of Cthulhu is still heavily influenced by D&D because while it uses percentile systems for skills, you still have like 3d6 for attributes.
Yeah.
You have strength, you have con, you have intelligence. And that's still sort of left over to a degree because, like, what do you do in 7th edition is everything's been moved to percentiles, but to generate, like, your character's strength, you roll 3d6 and then times it by 5, and that's your strength as a percentile, which is...
I mean, it works okay.
No, because like in previous editions, it was still, it would often like, oh, you need to lift a boulder, make a strength times 5 check. So now it just does the math. And then you also do is also divide it by half, and then I think by like a fourth.
That seemed fiddly to me.
Yeah, that's the same mechanics. Like that's as it has been in previous editions. It's just now you just do the math during character generation, and then numbers stay on your sheet, so you always see
cleanly reframed.
Yeah.
Yes. And some people are really mad about it.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. Well, what I will say and you brought this up. How does it do what it does? I would say the special sauce in Call of Cthulhu is and always has been the SAN roll. And this was the introduction of the SAN roll. James, as our resident historian, stop me if I misspeak, but this is the introduction of mechanics to measure the interior state of the character, the emotional and intellectual equilibrium.
As far as I'm aware, yes.
What SAN does for you, and this is elegant, this is the apex of elegance in design, is that you have this percentile stat that's SAN, and you roll it, and if you're if you're at your SAN or below, you're largely okay and have incorporated whatever awful thing you saw into your worldview. And if you exceed your SAN, then you take damage to your SAN rating. And there are some things that are so awful that they can only be incompletely incorporated. So it's like, oh, well, roll your SAN to see if you lose just a little SAN or a whole lot of SAN. And what this does is it's a ratchet that only goes one way, and that way is bad for your character. You lose SAN, so you have less SAN, so you're less able to incorporate bad data, so you're likely to lose more SAN after that, and it is a death spiral that fits the idea of a horror game like a Speedo.
It's beautiful. It is a beautiful piece of mechanical design. It really is. I mean, putting aside any objections that one might have about the simplification of mental illness and stuff like that, this is pulp mental illness. This is horror mental illness. It's not trying to be realistic. It's not trying to model any condition that anyone actually has. Mechanically, oh God, it's good. It's just lovely.
It's meant to emulate horror fiction, like what happens when the narrator sees the thing and runs off screaming into the night.
The constantly escalating pressure matched to your ablative ability to cope with it. And so by the time you hit the biggest hit, you are at your lowest ebb. And that's horror in a teacup. The surprise to me is, who thought anyone would want to do this? I'm like, Sandy Peterson, how did you guess that there were so many psychological masochists out there just waiting to say, deprotagonize me, mistress. I'm into it. And because, what makes Call of Cthulhu fun is having the worst possible thing that could happen to you in most other games happen to your character, which is deprotagonization. I'm no longer in control of my character. I'm no longer making the decisions. The GM is saying, oh yeah, you just run off. And then, next time we see the guy, he's got no pants and he's running around Walmart screaming about ghosts and werewolves. And I'm like,
carrying a gun.
That is not the choice I would have made on behalf of my character, and yet I'm now dealing with it.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think there's a couple things. Like, everyone has watched horror movies like, oh, well, that's stupid. I wouldn't have done what that character did. I would have done this, and I would have killed the monster.
I would simply have chosen not to lose my composure and fall into gibbering catatonia.
Don't go into the basement. Or if you go in the basement, don't go in the basement alone. Go into it with a buddy, and you're both armed with shotguns. See, there, problem solved.
Yes, and then you fire both barrels of the shotgun at the Bayaki, and it roars and takes your head off.
Yeah,
but sorry, it's a flashback.
Yeah, exactly.
Still processing this, huh, James?
Greg actually was in a Call of Cthulhu game that I ran. That another friend of ours. We were playing at Gen Con, and one friend was feeling.
Which one is this?
Oh, this is the Well of Sacrifice.
Yeah.
So one of our friends was feeling well, and first off, there's Aaron. Aaron went into this, crawled into this tunnel of this dried out well we were excavating, and his character got killed. Then Tom who's also playing, is like, I'm not feeling well, I'm going to go. Aaron, you can have my character. And so Aaron's like, you know what, this time I'm going to go in with a shotgun, and I'll be able to survive. And he goes in the exact same way and gets his head ripped off by the exact same monster in the same way. So it's a very strong impulse. Like, well, I could do it better. To backseat horror genre, basically.
Hold my beer. I figured out what the problem was with the last attempt was insufficient shotgun.
And then I think the other thing is, like, there's a lot of people who like playing games for the challenge, to outthink it, to play on that a game is not satisfying unless it's on the hardest difficulty. Masks of Nyarlathotep had little cards you could photocopy out of the back. And, one was, I survived Masks of Nyarlathotep, and you could put that in your wallet and show it to people at conventions. And the other one was like, my character died playing Mask of Nyarlathotep, but so did this many others. Mm-hmm. And so there is this mordant impulse to be like, yeah, let's just see how bad it gets. I should mention that the 7th edition does add a couple other new mechanic systems. Like the sanity system seemed pretty similar to other editions. I didn't really notice. But it does add like a couple of new twists that I liked. We mentioned that, all attributes are percentiles. One thing I did like, though, was that they had a push your luck mechanic. You could push your rolls. So if you fail a skill check... But you can't do
it for sanity.
Yeah, you can't do it for sanity, but like, let's say you fail a sneaking check. You're trying to sneak past a guard. And you fail, the GM can say, do you want to push your roll? We could say if your failure just represents the fact you didn't see an opening and you can't see a way past it, you could still run behind the guy and hope he doesn't notice. But if you fail this second attempt, then the consequences would be far worse than if you had not.
This is the horror version of taking 20 in D&D. Mm-hmm. That seemed good. The fact that they limited it just to skill checks is, again, we've got the Lancer divide between, okay, here's your skill shit, here's your combat shit, and they don't work the same because, surprise, they're not the same. Mm-hmm. And so this is an opportunity to, like, okay, you can push your luck with skills in a way that, if you do it wrong, it's going to screw you. Yeah. But in combat, if you fail a combat roll, you're pre-screwed. So from a horror perspective, there is no point to including push your luck there because it's like, oh, what, you're gonna have a worse you're gonna be screwed worse? No, we're not putting that in. We're not. If I've got you screwed already, I'm not giving you the opportunity to get out of it in exchange for the possibility for just deeper screwing.
Some other changes to the game mechanics for this edition include also bonus and penalty dice, which I feel is entirely because 5th Ed D&D did this with advantage and disadvantage dice, and I feel like they're doing the same thing. And I don't feel it's quite as elegant for a percentile system than for a D20. In Call of Cthulhu, you in 7th edition, if you get a bonus die, you roll. You normally roll 2d10, right? Like one for the 10s, one for the 1s. Mm-hmm. And for a bonus dice, you would roll 3d10, and 2 of those are 10s.
Your 10s place.
Yeah. And you get to pick which is the better of the two. And penalty works the same way. You pick the worst of the two. I've run some games of 7th edition. I think I forgot to use that system. I would just accept a plus or minus to your, like, do it at, plus 20 to your skill, negative 20 to your skill, something like that.
Bonus and penalty dice. And yeah, the changes, I don't know. Well, I have, most of this stuff is within sort of the horror genre where it's like, oh yeah, you can get a better result, but it's a thrilling gamble. You are it's got teeth to it. And that's Call of Cthulhu. That's within the keeping. That's keeping. Oh boy.
No, that's fine. I should mention we did get review copies of the Keeper's Guide and the starter set from Chaosium Publishing. So, in the interest of self-disclosure,
interest of self-disclosure, yes.
Yeah,
it's a cool book.
It is a cool book. Yeah.
Yeah, the art. There's a lot of art. It's generally very good. There's not like a consistent theme or style to it, which, I mean, may be okay.
I would say it's like sort of like an illustrated, not quite photorealistic, painterly style. It's like I can see that they're trying to keep a consistent art style in house, at least for the most part.
Well, I think they reuse a lot of art from previous editions too.
Ah, I didn't pick up on that. I haven't actually seen Call of Cthulhu since what we used to call 3rd edition, but I think was 2.5, which was the Games Workshop hardback in the mid-80s. So I don't have much to compare it to. Though,
with that creepy Sandy Peterson illustration that I can't seem to find online.
Yeah, it is the art style. Actually, I had a copy of 6th edition. I have a copy of 6th edition, autographed by Sandy Peterson, and it is a very. It's new art for almost entirely. I think they use a lot of the art from some of the side games. Like there are a lot of Cthulhu, or they use some of the illustrators. There's a lot of Cthulhu board games and card games. Arkham Horror and numerous card games. And I think I recognize the same sort of art style in them.
Yeah. So it's worth making the point they did make $500,000 on Kickstarter for this, which pays for a fair chunk of art. And it does look really good.
Though, the reused stuff, I think, is mostly like tiny little spot art, like an inch square, little decorations.
I should mention, you mentioned Kickstarter. Geez, but you didn't even mention like the whole reason 7th edition really exists. Is because of the Kickstarter crisis that Chaosium did in the a few years ago. Well, more than a few years ago at this point, but they funded a Kickstarter for Horrors of the Orient Express, one of their big famous campaign box sets, and they raised a lot of money for it. But the expenditure of what it took to make a box set and shipping basically nearly bankrupted the company. And so Chaosium was about to end as a company until new investors came in. Some of the old guard, I believe Greg Stafford was involved, and they rescued the company, and they decided to put out a new edition. So they sort of like relaunched the entire game line instead of... Because Chaosium kind of ran as sort of a zombie company for many years. Like it basically was unchanged from the 90s to the mid to late 2010s or early 2010s. And then after this relaunch around the time of the 7th edition, they've really focused the game line and certainly seems to be doing a lot more successful. But like there was... I mean, that's an entire thing separate to the game itself, but like it's very fascinating to read up on that. Like,
Wikipedia has it for anyone who wants to check it.
Yeah,
it really is.
You know, a game is good when reading about its extensive history as a business artifact is actually interesting, and not just the game itself, but the aura of business surrounding it. The constellation of anecdotes.
The only other new mechanic is luck, which again is a percentile thing. And there is an optional, and it's mostly used for things outside of the character's control. But like there is an optional rule to burn points of luck to make a skill roll after you roll, which we mentioned in our meta currencies episode. Yeah.
All right. Who felt that this was a move in a more pulp direction?
Oh, it definitely is. It definitely
yes.
is.
So,
pulp
all right.
Role-playing, yes, absolutely.
My thoughts on how people play it, the third phase of our podcast structure here.
Mm-hmm.
How do people play Call of Cthulhu? I think there are two ways people play it. And I am reminded of someone that... the sitcom All in the Family with curmudgeonly Archie Bunker who would say just the most terrible things about various segments of the population. And, someone who worked on the show and had researched it, he's like, yeah, there were two audiences for All in the Family. There was the left-wing audience that's like, oh, let's laugh at Archie Bunker, who is this Neanderthal who, makes fun of the right by saying the quiet parts loud. But there was also this right-wing All in the Family fans who are like, I just want to watch to see Archie Bunker articulate my actual views, and they laugh at him, but they never actually refute it. He's just saying what we're all thinking. And the same thing happened with Stephen Colbert decades later. There were right-wing Colbert fans who were like, no, he's not making fun of us, you idiot. He's just saying the stuff that we all know is true in a funny way with exaggeration to get a grin out of those who are in on the joke. And many of these people were probably very saddened when he actually came out and was like, no, Stephen Colbert on the Colbert Report is a character. Oh my God, this right-wing nonsense is nonsense. It's bullshit. It's not. No.
Footnote, for those in the UK, All in the Family was based on Till Death Do Us Part, which was one of the Alf Garnett sitcoms. Very much the same central character.
Really?
Yes, it's a British format originally. And Till Death Do Us Part ran for ages.
Well, I was this many years old when I found this out. But my point.
Yes, back to your point. Sorry.
The Call of Cthulhu relevance of Archie Bunker and Stephen Colbert is that I think that people play Call of Cthulhu in one of two ways, and one is the unspeakable oath, po-faced, nihilistic horror vastation approach, where it's like, I want to have a catharsis where I contemplate the bleak, uncaring sublime. I want the full Legati. And then there are also people who are like, okay, I'm going to play this in a motif horror way. And motif horror is a phrase that I learned on Mastodon just recently for material where it's like, okay, it's got horror tropes and horror icons and emblems, and it is full of, spiders and rats and cobwebs and bats and darkness and blood and goth girls, but it's not forcing you to confront the intolerable. And, an example would be Beetlejuice or Wednesday Addams, where it looks like horror, but it is not going to keep you up at night. Or
a number of the Hammer horror movies as well, which are all the tropes, and none of the some of them have scares, some of them are just going through the motions. We did touch on this actually briefly in the Delta Green episode.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I feel like Call of Cthulhu is doing a good job of serving two audiences that want very different things, and that this version of Call of Cthulhu is moving towards the motif style. And for the evidence for this assertion, I was looking at the pushing rules, and every skill on the probably, in my opinion, too long skill list has, okay, here's how you can push it, here's what happens if you push it, here's what happens if you push it while you're in a state of indefinite insanity. And a lot of those were kind of like, this is going to be a pratfall. The failed push in accounting is that you eat the example is you eat the records. And I'm like, really, man, is this where we're going? It's, that's clearly a gag. And if it hadn't been the skill that starts with AC, so it's not, if it hadn't been the first example you saw, it maybe wouldn't have bothered me so much. But more of the examples, there was a lot of that where it's like, oh, this is not Requiem for a Dream insanity. This is, sitcom insanity, where he thinks he's Napoleon. At least they took nymphomania off the randomly rolled list of manias. But I mean, just to me, the whole idea of randomly rolling your mental problem, I can see where it is it's a thing where, okay, I'm going to do something. This is going to move me out of my comfort zone because it's going to force me to do something unexpected. But at the same time, it has a fast food feel to me where I'm like, when I have a character lose it in a game, suffer intolerable psychological damage, I want that to be put on that character like a tailored suit. I want it to refer back to what's come before, and I want it to make sense, and I want it to be sad and horrifying and real and not a joke. And you can do that. One of the things in the sanity rules is, okay, here is, when your character falls into this situation, the GM can go and tinker with elements of their backstory. And I'm like, okay, this 1,000-year-old vampire like thing of, oh no, you're not remembering that right anymore. I'm like, that's creepy. Or, oh yeah, your relationship to your ex-wife has now become very strained. I'm like, okay, I'll buy that. But at the same time, in the hands of an immature GM, that's just gonna be fodder for the most puerile South Park style cheap shot humor you can imagine.
Yeah, again, this goes back to the toolkit nature of the game, where it doesn't give you like, hey, here's how to explain, here's a framing device to get all your player characters together. It also doesn't like protect you from those kind of like, haha, I'm going to poke fun at your character way, making you do something wacky and out of like break the mood of the game. I will say this about skills. I am glad they kept operate heavy machinery in that in the game list of skills. I love that skill. I don't know why, it just appeals to me on a deep and primal level. I have attempted to run games specifically to get the player characters to use that skill, and I literally called the game "Operate Heavy Machinery," and then they refused to use heavy machinery to fight the monsters.
See, you tipped your hand. They're like, if Ross wants me to do it, I ain't doing it.
It's true.
This game.
It's true.
I won't be fooled again.
It is a skill that makes the last scene of the Terminator a lot easier.
See, exactly. I gave them giant monsters.
The end of Carrie. In the book, at least, I don't remember how the movie ended, but it's like, oh, we're gonna hit this car with a giant, heavy duty 18-wheeler.
I did see, while researching for this episode, I did look online to see what people were saying about the differences between the Call of Cthulhu's, because again, this is the controversial edition, this is
the
like
Calls of
D&D.
Cthulhu or Call of Cthulhu's?
This is the one that, a lot of people don't like, because it requires some work to convert older scenarios, or they just change things, or they have the luck mechanic. Also, the tone of the game has changed slightly. Like, it's more inclusive, more diversive. There's like a pronoun thing on the character sheet. Like,
oh my god! If you're bothered by having pronouns on the character sheet, go do some work on your shitty self. Figure it out. It's the 21st century.
It is a thing. It is there for a reason. But one person did note, like, just looked at the various editions, like how many skill points characters got. And there has been, like, characters have gotten more skill points over the editions. Like 6th and 7th edition, there are about 390 points. But in 1st edition, you had like 160 points. And so while the skill list has inflated, so has the number of points. So there's just been generally, like, again, going towards more the competent but fragile character model, which for an investigative scenario or campaign game, model, I think that works, because if you can't find the clues, you can't really, even try to solve them.
You really don't want your investigator to get killed by the first cultist. You want them to get killed by the dark young in the giant, gruesome climax.
Yeah.
That's just good that's just good scenario design right there.
It's true. Yeah, I have run this game. There is actually one of the scenario anthologies they put out, Nameless Horror, has a scenario called The Space Between, which is set in modern-day Hollywood. And that was actually very nihilistic, as, they find out there's a New Age religion that the producer, that certain, powerful people in Hollywood are using, and it turns out badly. They also have one that I ran set in the French Revolution, which was the Reign of Terror. Sort of a prequel to Horror on the Orient Express. One of the villains in that campaign, you can see their origin in this particular scenario. So
outstanding.
Yeah, so it's like I've had fun running it. Again, with my personal preference, I would go darker because the Delta Green rules I think are a little less forgiving.
And I mean, I think that might be why they've gone skewed a little more pulpy and a little more towards the if you want to blend horror and humor, that's legit because Delta Green has set up camp at. We are the most po-faced, nihilist, bleak edition of this. And, they built their little cabin there, digging a well, irrigating their crops. They're not going anywhere. They've staked out that end of the continuum. And what that does to Delta Green is you will never have a lighthearted, fun Delta Green game. Dennis would pay for an airline ticket to come burn your house if you tried it, and he doesn't like leaving Canada.
You can do a very funny Delta Green game. It is black comedy, but like one of my best times.
But you couldn't write. You could absolutely run and play one, but you couldn't write one.
No, you could do like think of like a Coen Brothers movies like Burn After Reading, but with monsters in it.
I'm
comedy,
telling you, I don't think Arc Dream would publish it because they have decided that this is our thing we do. This is our tone. Our tone is going to be consistent. What people expect from us is this tone. I mean, if you went into McDonald's and ordered a hamburger and they said, I know you wanted a hamburger, but try this mac and cheese with tuna. It's really good. You would not care if it was the best mac and cheese with tuna you'd ever eaten. You'd be like, no, give me my fucking McDonald's hamburger. I came here knowing what I want and expecting to get it.
Well, there's a difference between running it and like getting it published too. So,
True. Absolutely true.
And I think it's the game I ran that was probably the funniest of Delta Green ended in a player crit failing an attack roll with a flamethrower, and then an enemy critically succeeding on an attack roll on the same player. So it ended rather explosively.
Sure.
And everyone had a great time, but I think that's still very thematically appropriate to Delta Green.
Yes,
but
it's just chaotic and absurd. That's the human experience. Ta-da! We call it the aristocrats.
I would say one of the things that is thematically different from Call of Cthulhu and Delta Green is the reliance on tomes or grimoires. And they've added new rules in this. Rules now have a mythos rating. So there's a reading time for the grimoires, and then you can learn spells. You take sanity damage, you gain a Cthulhu Mythos skill ability, but then you can go back and check the book, and the book has its own independent score. So if you want to figure out a clue, you can go back to Miskatonic University, read skim the Necronomicon for references to the fun guy from Yuggoth, and see, they go up here. This is how we can banish the monster, which I thought was a really interesting idea to bring the tomes into his campaign.
I thought it felt like D&D magic items. To me, I thought it's actually it's stripped.
James, don't say things you can't take back, James.
I'm not going to take it back. I think it stripped a lot of the kind of the mystery and horror of these things. And that's what do we need to solve this? We need a tome. Let's go on a quest for a tome. That's not what makes Call of Cthulhu special, or at least not for me. And we're talking about how people play this and why they play it this way. I think Call of Cthulhu works best as a one-scenario game. Generate your characters, play one scenario, then say, okay, that's the end of those characters. They reach the end of their lives, and perhaps your future characters will pick up on work they did or the clues they left behind. But I think the idea of having ongoing characters in a D&D style, and it was D&D that pioneered that school of storytelling, essentially. An awful lot of franchise fiction evolved out of the D&D model of these heroes will never die. They'll just keep going.
I don't know. I think Fritz Leiber was doing it with Fafford and the Grey Mouser.
Yeah, but
Howard was doing it with Conan before D&D ever came along.
I mean, those existed, but the heroes were changing as my distant memories of reading them in my teens. The heroes were changing, and there weren't that many of them. It wasn't like
Well,
book after book after book after book after book every 6 months.
I mean, this is the I think it was Robin Laws who introduced me to the idea that, an iconic hero is different from a literary hero, because a literary hero, it's all about, he grows and learns and becomes a better person. And nobody wants that from an iconic hero like Batman, Sherlock Holmes, or Tarzan. Nobody wants Sherlock Holmes to meditate on his interior state. They want him to go be the guy he's always been, do the things he's always done. Yeah. And, and that's fine. And that especially for plot-oriented pulp novels as discrete from character-driven literary novels.
Or I've just thought comic books as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Superheroes.
Well, I mean, if you look at the inspiration, the most of the Cthulhu Mythos stories are short stories. They're not novels or a series of novels.
You don't see, it's, the guy from Mountains of Madness turns up again in Shadows Out of Time, and Armitage is in 2 stories. But yeah, these characters have a Best Buy date. After a couple adventures, they've just seen enough. They're like, I'm just ready to be done. Let the darkness take me.
But I think the thing is, campaigns are very satisfying with Cthulhu. Having played and played and run several,
they separate from the source material, and you can't be chained to the source material.
Yeah, but I mean,
it's not without flaw.
Right. But there are, I think we have a good model in terms of the fiction, not necessarily the written fiction, but think of prestige television. Think of True Detective season 1 would be a campaign, and it would show the narrative arc of these characters, as well as unraveling a mystery too complex to resolve in a single game session.
Yeah. I mean, you're not forced to pick between character and plot.
Yeah.
When done well, plot illuminates character the way nothing else can, but you have to be ready to balance it.
And also, especially with Call of Cthulhu, having run Mask of Nyarlathotep twice and read a companion book to it and just read the book multiple times, it offers so many options that really can't be as satisfying because there's so many setups and payoffs in it that become very satisfying, where the players find a clue that is not resolved until 5 sessions later in a different country. There's and by the time they find the secret cultist base, and they can finally put it in and get questions they've been asking since the beginning of the campaign answered, that is a high point in gaming. Again, the base game as written doesn't really give you the support to do that. You have to kind of know how to scaffold on that, how to create a framing device to get players into it, and then also to introduce new player characters. The thing I keep saying is the first time I ran Mask of Nyarlathotep, the players started out with librarians and journalists, and a detective. But by the end, it was who's your new character? KGB assassin. Who's your other one? Other KGB assassin who's a twin to that one. Well, what about your character? I'm a gun runner for the KGB. Okay, I get it. All right. So everyone was kind of learned from their experiences and made more and more optimized characters to deal with the bullshit in their campaign.
What we need here is someone who can do horrendous violence and then go eat a meatball sandwich afterwards.
I am curious. I would like to read the new campaign to see how they change it. Yeah, it is a beast. But yeah, campaigns can be very satisfying, but it's a lot of work for a good.
You gotta put the work in. What you get out of it will be proportional to what you put into it.
And the framework for Call of Cthulhu is so versatile. There's one scenario that I read that I would love to run it or a version of it where the characters literally get put on trial for murder. And they, of course, are being framed by the bad guy, but they have to prove that they're innocent. And they have mechanics for the trial. They talk about the different phases of the trial and how to do all this stuff. And it's oh wow, yeah, we've never really explored a trial before. So yeah, that's just one example. But yeah, Call of Cthulhu is a fascinating But I think the current edition and all editions are just kind of like the games that have come from Call of Cthulhu are more appealing to me now because Call of Cthulhu is, and I think because it is Call of Cthulhu, is weighed down by its legacy mechanics and sort of,
Yet at the same time, it also has this amazing inertia, this forward movement. I mean, Chaosium could collapse tomorrow, God forbid, and people would still be playing Call of Cthulhu 10 years from now. It would just be that the books the main rule books would have a higher aftermarket value.
Yeah, and heaven knows there's enough copies out there by now.
Yeah. So, all right. Have we moved on to, okay, we've talked about how people play it. Some people play it motif horror, haha. Some people play it bleak revelation of the uncaring universe, oh no. And, to me, it's like, okay, so the fourth phase of our podcast structure is why do people play it that way? Which to me is like, okay, now I got to dig into the big question of what do I like about horror? Because if you look at bleed theory, which we have discussed before, bleed theory is the idea that when something happens to a fictional character that causes an emotional reaction in that character, we get a sort of contact high or a shadow of that experience. So bleed theory would suggest that you don't want to play a horror game. You don't want to play a game when your character's like, oh my God, my life is revealed to be meaningless. I am a smudge on the microscope slide of the cosmos. I am nothing. No, you shouldn't want to have those feelings. And yet, the people playing the nihilist game, they do. They chase that Legati hit. And to me, I'm like, yeah, why do I like these really, really bleak games and really bleak movies and really bleak stories? At the same time that, and let me be clear in my position that I also love motif horror and I love stuff that's just playing around with the look and the aesthetic and where I am not going to get dragged through some horrific experience that ends with me questioning everything that it means to have a human soul. I like both. I am perfectly capable of enjoying both. But I think that, the catharsis idea is real. It's you trick your brain and it's like, oh, hey, good news. Horror is fictional. You've seen The Untamed. That's not really what we're like. You've seen, 48 days. You've seen 14 days.
28 days later.
28. Yeah. You've seen 28 Days Later, and that's not real. Mm-hmm. So you get this catharsis, your relief, where you're like, okay, there are things in my life that I would prefer be otherwise, but at least I'm not one of the characters who's addicted to the alien fucktopus in The Untamed. I'm doing better than them, and it's a relief. And, as I was reading and thinking about Call of Cthulhu and, writing up my notes for this, I'm like, if you are a person like me who is neurotic and has, tendencies towards depression, where a lot of the bad things you think about really don't happen, I can see where horror is medicinal, where it's like, you're thinking that this bad thing is going to happen. You're thinking that your back hurts because you got back cancer. You're thinking that you're never going to have another success. You're never going to write anything that anyone gives a damn about ever again because you're in a dry spell. But as you can tell from the fact that all these other horrible things are fiction, maybe all the things your lying brain tells you about how miserable you are, maybe those are wrong too. Maybe those are also fictional. So maybe that's what catharsis is. I've been going on and on here. So I will shut up and let you talk. I thought it was quality, but go on.
There's good stuff in there. Can I jump in, Ross?
Well, actually, I was going to ask you a question, James.
Sure.
Because I think the other thing where there is the horror aspect is obviously the fundamental thing to Call of Cthulhu, but I think we kind of sort of we mentioned, but we haven't really focused on the historical aspect, particularly the 1920s aspect, and that's been fundamental to the game ever since its beginning and to this day into this new edition. What do you think caused, like, if it was not important to Call of Cthulhu, they would have changed it. They would have, set it in the modern day. They would have set it somewhere else. But like, people really like playing in the 1920s. I can't, like, for me, it's like, okay, it's interesting, but like, I don't get the appeal on a level, it doesn't appeal to me in the same sense that horror appeals to me, right?
Those flappers are so hot.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. And anything else you had to say.
It is a really interesting question because it very shortly after Call of Cthulhu came out, I think after Call of Cthulhu was successful, it was followed by a wave of other investigative games where you played a PI or a two-fisted pulpish hero. There was Justice Inc. from Hero Games. There was Mercenary Spies and Private Eyes by Mike Stackpole from Flying Buffalo using the Tunnels and Trolls mechanic. There was one from FGU that I'm blanking on. Daredevils, I think. And all of them with a similar kind of pulp era setting, and who remembers them, frankly. And they were good. Mercenary Spies and Private Eyes had some lovely ideas in it, because Mike Stackpole, basically. Justice Inc. had some really solid stuff going on, but the one that's lasted is Call of Cthulhu, which, incidentally, is why do people play Call of Cthulhu the way they do? Because that's the way they've always played it. And just looking at the online controversy about why, the switch is from 6 to 7. These are not major mechanical changes. They really are not. But, and it's a very retro system. I mean, it's very close to the original one. And it's still got the problems of that. It's an investigative game, or a game with a lot of investigation. You fail your spot hidden roll, you don't see the clue. And I was playtesting this with a few mates, only one of whom had ever actually played Cthulhu before. And yeah, they kept missing clues because they were missing rolls, and they didn't realize they were missing clues. And it wasn't a hard scenario, but it became hard simply because of the mechanics. I'm getting off the point. I think the 1920s is an interesting setting. Certainly at the time Call of Cthulhu came out, there were no other games set there. And it's the Jazz Age, and you've got Prohibition, you've got the gangsters, you've got potentially the rise of Nazis. And this, 1981, that's pre-Indiana Jones, isn't it? Indiana Jones, I think, was 82?
Maybe.
So there's possibly, one could argue there was something in the air. But it's not,
it says that Raiders of the Lost Ark is 81.
81, wow.
Okay.
But a Call of Cthulhu character is not Indiana Jones. Very far from it. So I'm not sure there's an overlap there. I don't know. I think it actually feeds into what Greg was saying. I think it's enough removed from the present day that even if it's scary, it's not too scary because it's in the past. It's, when the game came out 60 years ago, it would something that would have bothered my grandparents. It's not, I'm not scared by this. Old people are scared by this.
Let me throw something else in there about, because this is something that an impulse I've noticed playing historical games is you want to get it right? You don't want to, it's like, oh, wait, did they have telephones in the countryside at that time in this place?
Yeah, was the room lit by gas or was it lit by electricity? Yeah.
And when you have Shoggoths distracting your players, it takes all the pressure off you to get the minute details of historical fact correct.
I mean, even though, there is an extensive history section in the Keeper's book in 7th edition, and previous editions had a lot more, actually, including, like, what was it? Forensic science, investigative and forensic science, like, in the 1920s.
I love that book.
Yeah, and which someone complained online that was missing from 7th edition,
But, you could just find that online now.
Yeah, you could just find it online. So yeah, it's I think that's, there is this group, the HP Lovecraft Historical Society, and they spend a lot of time creating props for Call of Cthulhu games, and just like and they really making costumes and settings. They even made movies that are historically accurate to that time period, like a silent film for the Call of Cthulhu,
which is stunningly good.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
There is this like appeal to recreate and reenact history from the 1920s, and I think that is another very important sense of why people play. And I mean, maybe it's just because Lovecraft stories, like, because they are set in the 20s, that has become so evocative that people want to recreate Lovecraft country for their own games, and just stomp through Miskatonic University and the woods outside of Arkham and Dunwich and all of those other haunted places, and probably will be doing for generations to come. Like, I think it's sort of set now. It's very interesting that, like, Call of Cthulhu does have a setting that is very more specific and more evocative than anything D&D has. Like, there are, of course, D&D settings, but there's no Arkham equivalent to Arkham, Massachusetts, for D&D, right? Like, or Miskatonic University.
I don't know.
I mean,
maybe there is, but I'm not deep enough into D&D to know.
The fact that we can't think of it. I mean, I played enough D&D.
Greyhawk, Sigil, The Forgotten Realms.
Yeah, those are three things, not one thing. Like, you're mentioning.
So now, I don't know.
Not. Yeah. Okay. We could agree to disagree, but
we'll agree to disagree. Our friendship matters more to me than being right in this matter, Ross.
I think the greatest strength, though, is what they realized is they kept the focus on writing very high quality scenario. Like I mentioned, I ran one called The Space Between, and I ran one set in the revolutionary France, and they have multiple campaigns that are easy to adapt to your favorite system.
What's the one, like, Machine Tractor Station 626 or something?
Machine Tractor Station 37, which is one of the most nihilistic scenarios I've ever run.
I've heard it's real good.
Do you want me to spoil the
cuts?
Yeah,
no. I might get in there sometime.
It is set in the Soviet Union in the 1930s at a remote tractor station in the middle of nowhere during winter. And the players are sent there to go check on them. They haven't been telegramming us back or radioing us. Like, go find out what they're doing.
I want to read the novelization of Machine Tractor Station 37.
Interestingly enough, Tractor Station 37
isn't there Kharkov in there somewhere too?
Yeah, it is Machine Tractor Station Kharkov 37. It was actually done with the old edition of the Miskatonic repository, a monograph, which meant it was someone, Brett Kramer wrote it, who is now with Sentinel Hill Press, I believe. And it was a monograph released in 2004, and I don't believe... So I think you can still download it now. No, it's currently unavailable. So...
Wah, wah.
Yeah, before 7th edition, they had the monograph program, which allowed anyone to publish things that they submitted.
We have not. Okay, so James, are you familiar with Machine Tractor Station Kharkov 37?
35, yeah, but not 37.
Oh, damn it. Because I was going to suggest, we haven't settled on what our actual play is going to be, and, if Ross has that.
I mean, no, I have the PDF. I have it. I've run it before. So, yeah, I could run it for us. Yeah.
Cool.
That is the...
We might have to sing Song of the Volga Boatmen before playing to get ourselves in the mood, but I'd do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We'll probably, we might put that up as one of the candidates. Maybe have one last backer vote as a couple of candidates. But I would be happy to run it again. So they do have like the DMs Guild. There's an equivalent for Chaosium on Drive-Thru-RPG where people can submit their own fan material and sell it. But the monograph was like an early version of that, just done directly through Chaosium. There's a vast amount of scenarios for it. But I think
scenarios are financial heartbreakers.
but they're so fun to read and write and run.
I mean, yeah. But James, am I wrong?
Nope. No, you are completely right. You will not make money on them.
You will. They are. Yeah, you're just going to chase that dragon.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a shame because, as you say, it's the fun stuff to do. But, you might as well photocopy it yourself and fling those photocopies into a river.
I think that's the thing that with Call of Cthulhu, the scenarios and the campaigns are the real highlight. Like, the system is fine, but if you don't like it, there's any number of Cthulhu inspired game systems out there that may be better suited for you. You can make it more nihilistic with Delta Green. You can make it more better suited for mystery solving with Trail of Cthulhu.
You can go real Rails-like glider with Cthulhu. What is it?
Cthulhu Dark.
Yeah,
that would have your favorite combat rules, Greg. If you fight the monster, you die. That's it. That's all you have to run away.
Have fun walking into that jet engine, buddy.
Yeah. It's if you've never run it, if you've never read it, I would definitely recommend checking it out. There's a free starter set or PDF quick start guides available as downloads, and all their books right now for 7th edition have been beautiful.
Yeah, the box starter set is absolutely lovely. I think it's one of the, aside from the D&D stuff, which has just been absolutely top notch, this is some of the best starter material I've seen for any game for a very long time. It's really well put together. If you're looking for someone, if you know someone who's Cthulhu curious, this would be a really good way to introduce them not only to Lovecraft and his mythos, but how to have a lot of fun in it.
Thank you so much for listening.
This was a good one. This is where close to our hearts.
I have to say, I respect Call of Cthulhu enormously as an incredibly important system. But as I've said in earlier episodes, I'm not a horror gamer myself. To me personally, I've only played it 2 or 3 times in total. I've enjoyed those. I've run it once, which was in preparation for this, and it was fine. But at the same time, it's just for its place in the hobby, it's a fascinating read.
See, that's why you're a good counterbalance to the gibbering, jonesing horror addicts, me and Ross. We're just over, horror, that's the stuff. You got any on you, man? Shoot it right in my eyes. Obliterate my sense of this, my sense of meaning in the cosmos. I'm into it. So having you to counter that impulse is probably a good thing.
No, my pleasure.
Speaking of horror and also fantasy, why don't we? Our next episode is going to be the perfect Venn diagram intersection of both those. Morkborg, which is a dark fantasy role playing game that has sparked its own sort of movement. With mini games imitating its style, its rules, and it's certainly turned more than a few heads. So I'm very interested to see. I
haven't started doing the homework on it yet, but I will.
Yeah, it's got a very unique aesthetic that many people have sought to imitate since then, but no one's quite really got it. Recently, the author of it did post a screenshot of Drive-Thru RPG with just a grid of RPG titles, just their little thumbnails of the covers. And there's one right in the middle with a bright yellow, and that's Morkborg. And see, that's why we made the cover yellow. Everything else, it stood out. So, but before we go, we would like to thank 2 of our backers. I would like to thank Pete Petrucia of Imagining Games. I know Pete. We've talked multiple times. I met him at Gen Con. He published last year Chew, the RPG based on the Dark Horse comic series of the same name. He's a cool guy. He does a lot of cool stuff, so we'll put a link into Imagining Games, and you can see what kind of games they do. Chew is really fun. It's powered by the apocalypse. You're detectives, but you all have a weird food-based power. Like the main character in Chew, the comic, is I forgot the name they use for it, but basically he eats piece of food, he knows everything. He eats something, he knows everything that's ever happened to that thing. So if he eats an apple, he sees it growing in the orchard. He does that. So of course, like, he investigates crimes, and so it's like, well, I'll just take a bite out of his toe, and like, okay, now we can see what happened to him. So just a little bit of light cannibalism. But it's a very weird and fun game.
Okay. And I'll say a big thanks to James Matheson, who all that immediately comes to me is that he supported LND, and that's not nothing. That's a lot. Thank you, James.
And again, thank you to all our backers of the Kickstarter, and all of you are listening to this, whether you're on our private feed or on the public feed. Thanks for listening, and don't forget, we have a community Discord. Jump in and talk about games and all that fun stuff. And we'll talk to you next time.